Welcome in. The show is brought to you by the GMC Sierra Truck and GMC Yukon at Fowler Buick GMC in Brandon. Twitter handle @BowBounds. And we welcome in our friend and national college football analyst. He is an ESPN insider. He is Brad Edwards on the New Belgium Fat Tire Hotline. Brad, good morning. How are you?
Oh, doing well. I survived coming out of Thursday snow in Connecticut, going into 90-degree temperatures in Tallahassee for 2 days, and then back into Connecticut without getting sick. That was an accomplishment.
Good grief. Hey, Brad, that was an awesome game on Saturday night.
It was a fun one.
Wow.
It's a shame. It's a shame that it didn't really mean a whole lot in the grand scheme of things. I mean, can you imagine if NC State had made that field goal on the last play to beat Clemson, and Clemson had gone into that game needing to win to be able to keep its playoff hopes alive? That would have been some serious drama. But, it was fun to watch, whether it meant anything or not.
Dude, they were laying the wood on Saturday night. I mean, that was SEC caliber game. Of course, those are the two teams that are built like Southeastern Conference teams in the ACC. We'll see if Miami can get there, but that was fun. I loved every bit of that one, and Auburn and Ole Miss was very, very entertaining too. My producers are calling me out today, Brad. Say, I think LSU can win this game this weekend.
Yeah.
I just do. I don't think it's too far-fetched. So
right.
You crunch the numbers. Tell me why I'm crazy, or I may be onto something.
All right, the logical side of this, and I think this is what your producers and anyone else who disagrees with your stance is thinking, is that you're talking about a team coached by Ed Ogeron, has an offensive coordinator of Steve Ensminger, and a quarterback, Danny Etling, beating number one ranked Alabama, coached by Nick Saban. It makes absolutely no sense on the surface when you look at it that way, okay? But when you start to look more at the personnel and the way that the teams are playing, I mean, first of all, I think most of us would acknowledge LSU has the players, and has for as long as Alabama's been on this run, has the players to match up physically with Alabama like very few teams in the country can do. And that's where it starts. And I think the biggest part of that is that Alabama right now does not have a quarterback who's very good in the passing game. And if Alabama is not able to run the ball the way that they have throughout the season so far, and LSU is a good enough defense that I think could give them trouble on that front, and they have to throw it in order to have success offensively, I'm not sure that Alabama can. And if that happens and Alabama doesn't get that non-offensive touchdown that they seem to get at least once every game, if that streak finally ends, this could easily be just like the last few games have been at Baton Rouge when Alabama's come in under Saban. Like, they have all been low-scoring, field position, just defensive struggles where you're waiting on that one critical mistake, and most of the time LSU is end up making that mistake. But I can easily see this being a 17-14 type game.
Brad Edwards on the New Belgium Fat Tire Hotline. I believe LSU can win this game. Not saying they will, but it would not surprise. I do believe it will be one possession either way. That's how I see it. Brad, because LSU will give Bama some different looks, right? And you mentioned Ensminger, and he's been sitting in that room for the last 6 years going, why are we not doing this? Why are we not doing that? All right, as Les Miles and Cam Cameron, and maybe it was all Les, I don't know. But he's been sitting there for 6 years going, man, we have all this talent. That alone, the fact that he's willing to show different looks and do some more things, shouldn't that open up Fournette even a little bit more to have a chance to have it just a nice night against Alabama?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing for LSU is just not to be predictable on first down. I mean, if you go back and look at these previous Alabama games, they just seem to the majority of the time just to run it on first and second down, and then they get stuck in third and passing situation, and they can't convert. And you've at least got to try to keep them off balance by being less predictable. And I think you can probably count on Ensminger to do that. Now, at the end of the day, LSU is still going to make its living running the ball. I mean, that's what their strength is. Danny Etling does a much better job than Brandon Harris of completing like 5 to 10 yard passes, but he's not going to beat you throwing the ball. So LSU has to run. I don't know if they can run on Alabama. I'm not sure if anybody can run on Alabama. Nobody has so far this year. Very few teams have over the last 9 years. And if they can't run, I still think no matter how much they may have, become more diverse in the play calling, it's not going to make a whole lot more difference. But I think the big thing is don't turn the ball over. Don't give Alabama a short field. Certainly don't give them a defensive touchdown. Make them earn everything, because I think if you're LSU, your defense is good enough to hold them down, and that's that's the big thing here. Is for LSU, can you make one big play in the passing game somewhere? I mean, I think that's what you're hoping for, is don't make a big mistake in the passing game and make one big play, and just hope that over the course of the game that you can bust a couple of runs, because you're not going to have consistent success running the ball against Alabama like you have against everybody else.
Brad Edwards, ESPN insider on the New Belgium Fat Tower Hotline. Brad, you think Saban's waking up like at 3 o'clock in the morning this week going in cold sweats, saying to himself, there's no way I can lose to Ed Orgeron?
I don't know. I don't know that it has anything to do with who the coach is. I think it just has so much more to do with the talent that LSU has, and he recognizes what I'm talking about, which is that, look, if their passing game doesn't get better, if Jalen Hurts doesn't get more accurate, this could end up being a one-possession game where one critical mistake could cost them their undefeated season. And I think the scary thing for Alabama right now, I mean, you look around the country and you've got, like Clemson, for example, they're basically cakewalking into the ACC championship game. Michigan is kind of cakewalking into the Ohio State game. Alabama, they've already cleared a few hurdles to this point, but they keep having more put in front of them. And if they lose to LSU, they don't control their destiny anymore. They've got to hope that LSU loses. Even if they beat LSU, they still have to beat Auburn. And so that's the problem for Alabama, is that there are teams still in front of them that can beat them and end up winning the division. That Alabama, at least for now, has to feel like it must be undefeated to get into the SEC championship game. And that's a lot of pressure, especially when you consider as good as they've been over the last 9 years. They've lost a game every year but one.
So you like Alabama. This is what I'm picking up. You like Alabama probably to win the game, but you expect it to be close and would not be surprised if LSU was able to come away with the win.
Right. Yeah. Look, Bo, I think I've been at 9 of the last 10 Alabama LSU games. Okay. So, these last 2 years, the last two times they've not the last 2 years, but the last two times that Alabama has gone to Tiger Stadium, LSU basically blew the game. I mean, in both of those scenarios, Alabama's offense could not do anything for most of the game offensively. And then all of a sudden, when they needed it most, late in the fourth quarter, they were able to put together a drive after their defense had kept them in the game. And you can decide for yourself whether that's LSU's conservative play calling that contributed to that or not. They stayed within one score. They made the late drive. And, one year they won it with the late touchdown. The other one they forced overtime and ended up winning it in overtime. And both of those years, Alabama was a clear-cut favorite in the game. Not a huge favorite, but they were the team that was playing for something. And so you look back on it, it's like, how is this any different? And that's kind of my thing. Like, why would I believe that this season is a whole lot different from 2014 or 2012? And there's nothing
I agree.
that tells me that it is. And that's why I think it's going to be the same type of game.
College Game Day on ESPN Radio. He is Brad Edwards talking LSU and Bama. I know you know this stat, Brad. Last 7 Bama LSU games, there's been 95 players who were drafted in the NFL. 51 from Bama, 44 from LSU. Over 20 in the first round. Staggering. Absolutely staggering. And no other conference. You know what drives me nuts? I understand how many Big Ten guys are on the national sets, ESPN and Fox and so on. And a lot of them do a good job. But, man, if Bama or, Auburn's coming on, and A&M's played well, and LSU's played well as of late, but if any of those teams, and let's just say Bama, had Michigan's schedule, that's all I would hear about, Brad, on all these shows. Do you agree or disagree?
Right. Yeah. I mean, I do. Look, I don't.
And I know a lot of them are your friends and colleagues, but it just drives me nuts.
I don't think you can discredit Ohio State very much. I mean, they've done a lot over the last 15 years to be worthy of the praise that they've gotten. Now, I don't think anybody else in that conference has. I mean, as much improved as Michigan is right now, they still haven't won anything. And so let's wait for Michigan to win something before we start putting them in the same category as some of these teams that have been doing it for a long time. The same thing's true for Washington. Not that I hear people doing it with Washington, but just to be consistent here, I don't think you can assume that Washington's on that level at this moment either. And yeah, so you're talking about the success that the SEC has had, over, what is it now, 12 years or so, going back 11 years. There have been so many different teams involved, but I think nationally, the way that more people are looking at it now is that over the last 5 years or so, it's basically become Alabama. That Florida's fallen off. Auburn has been just madly inconsistent. Now, that's probably a nice way to put it. LSU has underachieved. And so I think the rest of the country looks at it and says, well, don't give me SEC. I'll give you Alabama, but don't give me SEC. And so they would say the same thing that you would say about the Big Ten, which is it's one team that's really done it. Now, obviously, the SEC second, third, and fourth teams have been at a much higher level than the Big Ten's second, third, and fourth teams. No doubt. But I think when you really stop and look at it, it really in both cases over the last 5 years has basically been one team that has been doing everything for the conference.
All right. Brad Edwards, ESPN Insider. Brad, I was on Auburn early, so I got them several weeks ago. I think they're top four. They're not ever going to be ranked this because of what happened early. I think today, neutral field, I think they're top four, top five team in the country.
I have them ranked 6th or 7th this week. I can't remember where it is. I think 7th. So, no, I think I have them 8th. I have them behind A&M. They have to be behind A&M to me. I mean, A&M went into their place, and they didn't just beat them, but it wasn't even competitive in the fourth quarter. And I know Auburn has changed some things since then. Right. But I can't rank them I can't rank them ahead of A&M. And I still have them behind Louisville and Ohio State at the moment. But could they beat those teams in a neutral field? Sure. And I think they'd also lose some games to those teams in a neutral field. It just depends on how many you're best of how many. But look, I think ultimately LSU and Auburn are good enough to beat Alabama on a given day. But as well as both of those teams, both Tigers, are running the ball right now, they have done it against teams that don't stop the run anywhere close to the way that Alabama does. And so great for LSU, great for Auburn that they've found an identity offensively. The running game is having a ton of success, but until you do it against Alabama, I'm not saying I consider them a pretender because I still think that they're both maybe top 10 teams. But you're not a national title contender. You're not a playoff contender or even an SEC title contender unless you can run the ball, not to the same degree, not 400 yards, but unless you can line up and run it for about 200 on Alabama. Right. You're not as good, or you're not a threat, I guess is probably the better way to say it. You're not a threat to become a factor on the national scene unless you can do that to the best rush defense in the country.
Fair enough.
And then both of them will have to. They'll have to go through them if they're going to finish it out.
And Brad, I keep thinking the East is going to come back, and they're just awful.
Bo, this summer you and I talked right before the season, and I made the comment that I think that the East is as close has gotten as close to the West as it has been in a long time. And I think you said, really? And yeah, you were right to question that. And maybe you started to buy into it at some point after the season started. But no, I mean, I'm way off that ship at this point. It's kind of an embarrassment. And I'm actually doing a piece right now on Florida, and I'm guessing that the selection committee is not going to have them ranked nearly as high as the polls do. Both polls have them in the top 10. I can't imagine the selection committee will have them that high, because when you stop and look at it, and that's really what I'm getting into here, they haven't beaten anybody. The only team that they've beaten that has a winning record right now is Kentucky.
Eesh.
All right, the only team, there's not a single team they've played that's currently ranked. The only one that was even ranked at the time they played them was Tennessee, and Tennessee beat them. So, I mean, what have they done? And they have, I mean, their defensive numbers are excellent, and I think they are a good defense. But you also have to recognize we have efficiency rankings at ESPN that you can break up offensively, defensively, special teams. Every team Florida has played to this point ranks 50th or worse in offensive efficiency. Tennessee is the best offense Florida has faced this year.
Cupcake City.
So we don't know. And the thing is, they haven't been blowing out these teams either. Now, look, Florida's better than they were last year. I'll give them that without hesitation. But are they top 10 good? I got to see a lot more before I believe that.
The East, it's awful. That is it. And now what's happening with Rocky Top and Butch Jones?
I know you've talked about this. If Florida loses at Arkansas this week, then you would assume that they would lose in Baton Rouge after that.
Right.
If they lose those two games, I mean, Tennessee, I think you were about to get to, is coming unraveled. I don't think it's completely out of the question that Kentucky could win the SEC.
And they're all, look, I was at the Mississippi State-Kentucky game.
They should
I
have lost
know.
to Mississippi State. Yes.
Kentucky is, when I say they're not a good, they're not a good football team, Brad. Not even.
No.
Oh, it was that was a tough watch. Thank goodness for Kentucky bourbon. All right, I'm going to leave you with this, Brad. Brad Edwards, our friend, ESPN insider on the New Belgium Fat Tire Hotline. I think LSU rattles hurts, and it's a heck of a game, like you said, back and forth. And I think Fournette and LSU prevail on Saturday night. I think it's going to be close and a great game. So that's.
I'm hesitant to pull the trigger on LSU winning, but I will be very surprised if Alabama wins by double digits. I expect it to be a tight game all the way. And if it is, all it takes is one critical mistake by Alabama, and you're correct.
Yeah. Hey, as a Southerner, I need you to do me a favor. Try to put the brakes, or maybe slash some of your colleagues' tires on the Michigan hype. It's killing me, but I know it's just part of the deal. But do whatever you can for us. Are you going to Baton Rouge?
I will be there. I have the distinct privilege, and I'm not sure how many other people in the country can say this, of being on the sideline in consecutive weeks to watch Clemson, Florida State, and then Alabama, LSU, arguably the two greatest collections of athletes on a single football field this entire football season. And at least in college, obviously.
Yeah.
And and I'm going to get to see that back-to-back weeks. So
you have a great job.
I do have a great job, no question about that.
You have a great job, a great guest, good friend, Brad Edwards on the Out of Bounds Show. Hey, have a great time in Baton Rouge. We'll talk to you next week.
All right, thank you, Bo.
He's one of the best.